The silence that followed the third kill was different. Sarah could sense the change in the atmosphere as she moved through the abandoned machinery of what had once been a textile factory. The remaining 3 snipers had stopped their random movement and radio chatter. They were thinking now, planning something coordinated and deadly. She could feel their presence like a weight in the air, 3 minds working together to turn her hunt into their trap. Sarah paused beside a massive industrial loom, its rusted frame providing perfect concealment while she studied the layout ahead. The factory floor stretched out before her, filled with broken equipment and debris that created a maze of potential hiding spots. Somewhere in this mechanical graveyard, her remaining targets were waiting. But waiting for what? The answer came sooner than she expected. A rifle shot cracked from her left, the bullet striking the concrete wall inches from her head. Before she could react, a second shot came from her right, and then a third from directly ahead. They had positioned themselves in a triangle, using her own tactics against her. Each sniper could cover the others, creating an overlapping field of fire that turned the factory floor into a killing ground. Sarah dropped behind the industrial equipment as more shots rang out. These weren't random fire. They were precise, calculated attempts to drive her toward a specific location. She realized with growing alarm that they had been watching her approach, studying her movement patterns just as she had studied theirs. The hunters had become the hunted, and they were trying to herd her like an animal into their trap. But Sarah had faced coordinated enemies before. During her deployment in urban combat zones, she had learned that the key to surviving multiple attackers was to break their coordination, force them to react individually rather than as a team. She needed to make them angry, desperate, or scared enough to abandon their careful positioning. Moving carefully through the machinery, Sarah worked her way toward the eastern wall of the factory. Her plan was risky, but necessary. She would expose herself just enough to draw fire from one sniper, then use his muzzle flash to locate his exact position. It meant gambling her life on speed and accuracy, but sometimes the most dangerous move was the safest option. The gamble worked better than she had hoped. When she briefly showed herself near a broken window, the sniper positioned in the factory's old office section immediately took the bait. His shot was hurried, meant to keep her pinned rather than kill her outright. But the muzzle flash gave away his location perfectly, and Sarah's return shot was anything but hurried. The fourth sniper dropped from his elevated position, crashing through the office window and landing on the factory floor with a sickening thud. His rifle skittered across the concrete, useless metal, and wood that would never claim another life. The death of their teammate seemed to break something in the remaining 2 snipers. Their disciplined fire became erratic, desperate. Sarah could hear them calling to each other in their native language, voices tight with fear and anger. They had gone from hunters to hunted to desperate survivors in the span of an hour, and the psychological pressure was destroying their tactical thinking. Sarah used their confusion to advance deeper into the factory. She found herself in what had once been the facility's main production floor, where massive textile machines created a forest of metal and shadow. The space was perfect for close-quarters hunting, with dozens of concealment options and multiple sight lines. The 5th sniper made his fatal mistake when he tried to relocate without properly clearing his movement route. Sarah caught him in the open space between 2 large machines, silhouetted against a dirty window. Her shot took him center mass, and he collapsed among the rusted machinery like a broken doll. 1 target remained. The final sniper had gone completely silent. No radio calls, no movement that Sarah could detect, no shots fired in anger or desperation. He was either dead already, which seemed unlikely, or he was planning something that required complete stealth and patience. Sarah found herself respecting this unknown enemy, even as she prepared to kill him. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Sarah worked her way through the factory's maze of equipment. Every shadow could hide an enemy rifle. Every sound could be the prelude to sudden death. Her nerves were stretched tight, adrenaline making her hyper-aware of every detail while simultaneously threatening to make her jumpy and careless. The attack came from above. The final sniper had somehow made his way into the factory's network of maintenance catwalks and overhead platforms. His first shot came from directly overhead, forcing Sarah to dive behind a massive gear assembly as the bullet sparked off the concrete where she had been standing. His position gave him a commanding view of most of the factory floor, but it also trapped him in a location with limited escape routes. Sarah smiled grimly as she planned her approach. Height advantage was useful, but it could also become a prison if your enemy was smart enough to exploit it. She began working her way toward the support pillars that held up the catwalk system, using the machinery for concealment while keeping track of the sniper's movements above. The enemy was good, she had to admit. He moved carefully along the catwalks, trying to maintain his elevated position while staying ahead of her advance. But he was also running out of options. The catwalk system only covered about half of the factory floor, and once he reached the end, he would have to come down or make himself completely vulnerable. Sarah reached the base of the main support pillar and looked up through the metal framework. She could see movement above, the shadow of her target as he tried to find a new shooting position. He was maybe 30 feet above her, close enough that she could probably hit him with a thrown wrench if necessary. Instead, she did something completely unexpected. Sarah called out to him in clear, loud English. "You're good, but you're trapped up there. Come down and surrender, and I'll make sure you're treated according to the Geneva Convention." The response was immediate, a rifle shot aimed at her voice. But Sarah had moved as soon as she finished speaking, and the bullet struck empty air where she had been standing. More importantly, the muzzle flash had given away his exact location on the catwalk system. Sarah's return shot was perfect. The bullet struck the enemy sniper in the chest, and he toppled from the catwalk to crash onto the factory floor below. His rifle clattered away into the darkness, and the factory fell silent except for the distant sound of settling debris. 6 targets eliminated. Mission accomplished. Sarah checked her watch in amazement. 1,005 hours. The entire engagement had lasted exactly 18 minutes from her first shot to the final kill. She had hunted and eliminated 6 professional snipers in less time than it took most people to eat breakfast. The realization was both thrilling and sobering. As she made her way toward the factory's main entrance, Sarah's radio crackled to life. Colonel Martinez's voice was tight with concern. "Chun, report your status. We heard sustained gunfire from your sector." "Mission complete, sir," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. All 6 targets eliminated. Requesting extraction at the primary rally point. There was a long pause before Martinez responded. "Confirmed, Lieutenant. Extraction team is en route." Outstanding work. Sarah emerged from the industrial complex into the bright morning sunlight, her rifle slung across her shoulder and her mission complete. Behind her, the abandoned factory held the bodies of 6 enemy snipers who had terrorized her battalion for weeks. They had been skilled, professional, and deadly. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated the quiet lieutenant from Montana who knew how to hunt. The morning fog rolled across the abandoned industrial district like a gray blanket, hiding the deadly game that had been playing out for 3 weeks. Lieutenant Sarah Chun pressed herself against the cold concrete wall of a ruined factory, her breath coming in controlled puffs that disappeared quickly in the chilled air. Somewhere in the maze of broken buildings and twisted metal, 6 enemy snipers had turned this sector into their personal hunting ground. The statistics were grim. In just 21 days, these phantom shooters had eliminated 43 soldiers from her battalion. Each death was precise, clinical, and devastating to morale. The enemy had chosen their positions with surgical precision, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned every street corner into a potential death trap. Command had tried everything: artillery strikes, drone reconnaissance, even sending in special forces teams. Nothing worked. The snipers moved like ghosts, striking from one location only to vanish and reappear somewhere else entirely. Sarah had volunteered for this mission knowing the odds. At 28, she was one of the youngest lieutenants in the regiment, but her skills with a rifle had earned respect even from veteran sergeants who had seen combat across 3 different conflicts. Her grandfather had taught her to shoot when she was 12, using an old hunting rifle on his farm in Montana. What started as weekend target practice had evolved into something much more serious when she joined the military academy. The briefing had been stark in its simplicity. Intelligence suggested the 6 snipers were operating from a network of concealed positions throughout the industrial complex. They communicated using short-range radios, coordinating their attacks to maximum effect. Traditional assault tactics had failed because the enemy could retreat through underground tunnels and maintenance passages that honeycombed the area. Previous attempts to clear the zone had resulted in devastating casualties. Sarah's commanding officer, Colonel Martinez, had pulled her aside after the briefing. His weathered face showed the strain of watching his soldiers die one by one. "Chun, I'm not ordering you to do this," he had said quietly. "But if anyone can pull off something impossible, it might be you. These bastards have been picking us apart, and we're running out of options." The plan was deceptively simple. Sarah would enter the complex alone, using her knowledge of urban warfare and sniper tactics to hunt the hunters. She would have no backup, no radio support, and no extraction plan until the mission was complete. It was essentially a suicide mission disguised as a tactical operation, and everyone knew it. Now, crouched in the shadows with her modified M24 sniper rifle, Sarah began her mental preparation. She had studied the attack patterns for weeks, noting the timing, the locations, and the apparent coordination between shooters. There was a rhythm to their operations, a predictable sequence that suggested professional military training rather than random guerrilla activity. The first target revealed itself at 0847 hours. Sarah caught the glint of a scope from a window on the third floor of what had once been an office building. The angle was perfect. The sniper was focused on the main approach route that military patrols typically used. He had no idea that death was watching him from an unexpected direction. Sarah controlled her breathing, feeling her heartbeat slow to its combat rhythm. The distance was approximately 400 meters, with a slight crosswind from the east. She made the minute adjustments to her scope, accounting for bullet drop and wind drift. The enemy sniper shifted slightly, and she could see his profile more clearly. Young, probably in his early 20s, with the focused intensity of someone who had been doing this for months. The shot broke clean and true. The enemy sniper collapsed backward, his rifle clattering to the floor of his hide. Sarah was already moving before his body hit the ground, relocating to a position 50 meters away. She had learned long ago that staying in one place after a shot was a fast way to become a target yourself. The reaction was immediate. Radio chatter erupted across the enemy frequencies that intelligence had been monitoring. The remaining 5 snipers knew they were being hunted, and their careful coordination began to shift into something more desperate. Sarah smiled grimly as she settled into her second position. She had disrupted their rhythm, forced them to react instead of act. That was exactly what she wanted. The second target made his mistake 15 minutes later. In his haste to relocate after his partner's death, he exposed himself while crossing between buildings. Sarah's second shot dropped him in the narrow alley between 2 warehouses. Now the enemy knew they were facing a serious threat, not just another random patrol stumbling through their kill zone. The psychological pressure was mounting. These snipers had grown comfortable in their superiority, used to being the predators rather than the prey. Sarah understood that mindset because she had lived it herself during previous deployments. Confidence could become overconfidence, and overconfidence led to mistakes. Her radio crackled softly with updates from the observation posts positioned around the perimeter. The enemy was definitely reacting to her presence. Movement had been detected in several buildings, and the normal pattern of coordinated shots had ceased entirely. They were going into defensive mode, which meant they would be harder to find but also less effective at their primary mission. Sarah began working her way deeper into the complex, using maintenance tunnels and service corridors that the enemy probably assumed were their exclusive domain. Her small frame was an advantage in these confined spaces, allowing her to move through areas that larger soldiers would find impossible to navigate. The third sniper was positioned in what had once been a water tower, giving him an elevated view of the entire sector. It was a smart position, defensible, and with excellent sight lines. Sarah spent 20 minutes working her way into range, using debris and abandoned vehicles for concealment. When she finally had a clear shot, the target was scanning frantically with binoculars, obviously trying to locate the threat that had eliminated 2 of his team members. This shot was more challenging, nearly 600 meters with an elevated target. Sarah took her time, calculating angles and accounting for the slight downward trajectory. When she squeezed the trigger, The bullet found its mark with deadly precision. The third sniper tumbled from his perch, his rifle falling to the courtyard below with a metallic crash that echoed off the surrounding buildings. 3 down, 3 to go. But Sarah knew the remaining snipers would be desperate now, and desperate enemies were often the most dangerous. They would abandon their carefully planned positions and try something unpredictable. She needed to stay ahead of their thinking, anticipate their moves before they made them. The industrial complex had fallen eerily quiet. Even the distant sounds of military activity seemed muted, as if the entire area was holding its breath. Sarah checked her watch, 0923 hours. She had been hunting for 36 minutes and had eliminated half of her targets. But she knew the hardest part was yet to come. The surviving snipers would be working together now, using their remaining numbers to set up ambushes and coordinate their defense. Sarah moved through the shadows like a predator, her rifle ready and her senses sharp. Somewhere ahead, 3 enemy shooters were waiting for her, probably planning their own surprise. But she had advantages they didn't know about: patience, training, and the absolute determination to complete her mission no matter what the cost. The hunt was far from over, and the most dangerous phase was just beginning.